Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Eye on College Basketball YouTube channel. I'm David Cobb, alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Adam Finklestein. Adam, we're coming off the first football weekend of the year. How'd your teams do? Are you hanging in there? How's your morale?
We only use one ball in the Finkelstein family household, and it doesn't have the points at the end. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So it was a big weekend for official visits that coincided with some of that football stuff. So from that perspective, it was interesting.
Okay, so on Saturdays and Sundays in the fall, when everyone is sitting there watching their teams play, you're just kind of sitting there deciding, does this guy in the class of 2024 deserve a fourth star, or is he really just a three-star guy?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm looking on the sidelines to see which basketball recruits are there, and there were some interesting developments on that front for sure.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into one in particular. Bronny James has certainly made headlines for attending an Ohio State football game. We'll get there eventually, but we are going to start with a athletic department that is most certainly not a football school whatsoever. Although Duke is 2-0 under first-year coach Mike Elko on the football field, but it's a basketball school, and I don't think Mike Elko would shoot back at that.
You're throwing the early Kentucky shade already. Look at
you. But hey, the Blue Devils land a fifth five-star prospect in the class of 2023 in recent days, with TJ Power choosing the Blue Devils. Blue Devils, just to give you a little perspective, number one in the team rankings for the class of 2023. After landing the number one class of 2022 as well. So Jon Scheyer is just off to a ridiculous start. Well, we'll break down TJ Power in depth here in a second, but just kind of what's your overall thought on the way Scheyer has just been able to crush this thing right out of the gate?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. I'll continue to say it. What was 15 months ago, I think a lot of people had some very legitimate questions about whether or not he would be able to perpetuate that brand of the brotherhood, and whether or not Duke would be quite as big of a presence on the recruiting trail. Those questions have certainly been answered, not just in the class of 2022, but now in the class of 2023 as well. So they have a terrific freshman class there right at the moment. And now they have 5 commitments, all within the top 25 in the national class of 2023. So they've gotten star power, they've gotten depth, and they've really answered the call at every step along the way. Now the question becomes 2024, because that is a class that does not have a ton of depth. Duke does not have an early commitment in that group yet. And so while they've had nothing but success in their first 2 classes, the world of recruiting, you got to quickly move on to what's next. And what's next right now is 2024.
Yeah, but in the present, though, things are going quite well. I mean, if you look at those rankings, Arkansas 2, Alabama 3, Kansas 4, Kentucky 5. Now, look, there's still 11 uncommitted prospects in the 24/7 Sports top 30. So there could still be some moving among that top 5, but Duke is in a great position to potentially land consecutive number one classes to start off Jon Scheyer's tenure. What's curious to me about the TJ Power commitment is the fact that he is now the 3rd Duke commitment in the class of 2023 who is listed at 6'8" and 210 pounds and as a power forward as well on the 24/7 Sports page. So what does he do with this? And this is a recurring theme already for Jon Scheyer, because if you go and look at the 22 class and the team they're about to put out there on the court in a couple of months, you got 2 5-star centers. And you've already broken down in the past, the differences between Derek Lively, Kyle Filipowski, how they're going to work together this season for Duke. But flash forward to 2023-24, how in the world would Jon Scheyer mix 3 6'8", 210-pound guys together in the same rotation?
Well, that's really the question. I mean, I think, listen, in this day and age, positions are fluid. I think everybody understands that. These are 3 players that, although they have a lot of similarities, they also have some differences. But I think one of the key differences is the expectations they have coming in. I think TJ Power is heading to Duke understanding that he's going to be a multi-year player. So he's not someone who's going in with one and done aspirations. That's not something that Jon Scheyer and his staff are going to have to manage, because that is the flip side of recruiting. The 5-star talent is that you have to manage those expectations from day one. And sometimes the kids get there and they're not yet ready to put up the same type of impact that would be consistent with their reputation. TJ Power is going in, and he said this, he's going in with the expectation that he's going to be there for multiple years. He knows he's got to get stronger. He knows he's got to work on his body. He is unselfish by nature. So this is not someone that is going to theoretically become a transfer risk or problematic if he doesn't get a lot of minutes or a certain amount of starts or shots or anything like that as a freshman. So I think this is more of a multi-year play for Duke, someone that can really help establish their culture, because that's the other thing. Jon Scheyer did so well on the recruiting trail, and he got so many one and done types. But as a young head coach, you want to be in a position where you can establish your culture in year one, and then you can have some veterans help to carry that on to subsequent years. So TJ Power is the type of ultra mature, high character young man who can do just that. And if you watched his announcement on 24/7 Sports, you saw it, because, he teared up talking about his grandmother, talking about, his family and the people who've supported him. So the character and those intangibles, it came right through the screen. If you watch that, that's what they're getting with TJ. I think with Sean and Mackenzie, Sean is someone that can double. Sean Stewart can double as a small ball 5-man. We've seen that, basically throughout his career to date. He is strong. He's physical. He's explosive off 2 feet. The other thing he is really versatile defensively. He can move his feet away from the basket, be ultra switchable. So this year, with guys like Lively and Filipowski and Mitchell, Jon Scheyer's got a lot of almost old school big men. Next year's class, they're going to be smaller, more versatile up front. And if, they can blend those two together, you have to assume that not all 3 freshmen big men at Duke this year are going to end up being one and done. So if you get one of those more conventional big men back, and you can blend them with someone like Sean Stewart, who's kind of a small ball 5 or an old school kind of power forward. And then you've got Mackenzie, who's, in my mind, he's a stretch 4. He can really shoot it. He can pick and pop. But he's certainly more skilled and able to shoot the ball as well as probably anyone on that roster right away. So you've got different pieces that can be interchangeable, with TJ Power being the multi-year player who's going to develop and hopefully blossom into a key piece down the road.
I would love to see Mark Mitchell come back, and then Duke can start 4 players who are 6'8", 210 pounds, and then maybe have Jeremy Roach back to run the show at point guard or something. That would be fun.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark Mitchell is the guy that based on the intel that's coming out of Duke right now, who is really exceeding expectations. So I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's going to be really interesting to see. You're going to have Lively, who's going to start, and then is it going to be Filipowski or is it going to be Mitchell? Because Filipowski came in with the bigger rep out of the recruiting world, but Mitchell has, according to all reports, played really, really well this summer. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch, not just in this season, but then how it affects who stays at Duke, and then how that group fits with the 2023 recruiting class.
Yeah, and you mentioned TJ Power committed on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, which is just awesome. That thing has just taken off with rocket fuel. So if you're into what we're talking about here, go check that page out. There's a lot more along this same train of thought here. But we got to move on. As much as we'd love to talk about Duke, there are some waves being made in the Big East. Somewhat surprisingly, I don't really associate the Big East with being the juggernaut recruiting conference in college basketball. But as of this moment, the Big East has 3 of the top 11 classes in the 24/7 Sports team rankings. And a lot of that is due to the fact that Xavier and Marquette have been landed some pretty highly touted prospects. And in particular, what sticks out to me about this development is the fact that Sean Miller is just hitting the trail and not missing a beat after coming out of Arizona in a little bit of a tough situation just with his rep and whatnot. Takes a year off. Now he's back at Xavier, a place he's coached before, and he's doing some serious work on the trail. I mean, what's stuck out to you about what Xavier's been able to do?
Well, I think that for Sean Miller, this was not unexpected. I mean, to your point, he was going to have questions to answer about how things ended at Arizona. But if you go back, in fact, it was my very first week on the job here. And the question I was asked is, which first-year head coaches are set to make the biggest splash? And Sean Miller was one of the first people I said, because he's got a brand that resonates beyond the school he's at. Sean Miller is a national name at this point. So he walks into a gym and people are going to recognize it. And it's not like, oh, is he at Arizona or is he at Xavier? It's like, no, that's Sean Miller. So I think that is really important, because he's now one of those coaches who is recognizable regardless of where they're at. And the class that he's built up, well, let me take a step back. Before he built up his class, he built a coaching staff that had a history of recruiting coast to coast. And so that was the first piece, assembling a coaching staff that was able to identify talent and then get him in front of the right people where he could really capitalize on the value of his personal brand. And so you put those two things together, and what they've been able to do is build up an early 4-person class, which is what their goal was heading into the early signing period, which is still 2 months away. And they've got multi-year impact players. And they've also got positional size, especially on the perimeter, not necessarily at the point guard, where Trey Green, a little undersized, but he's one of the best scorers at the lead guard position in the class. And then with Dalen Swain and Reed Ducharme, you have 2 wings. And I think a lot of people thought they may be redundant, but if, again, similar to Duke, if you look a little more closely at what each player does best on the floor, you see that, in fact, they're not redundant, but they will, they'll complement each other really, really well. Reed Ducharme, 6'6", 6'7", still filling out, but he is functionally very, very strong, going to be able to guard bigger guys in the lineup, and he's evolving as a shooter. Then you've got somebody like Dalen Swain, who is a big wing with some legit guard skills. He can play make in the open floor. He can defend smaller guys. And so you put those 3 players together along with Green, and you've got kind of every bucket that is checked off there. And you've got playmaking, you've got scoring, you've got players who can defend bigger guys in the front court. You've got players who can be interchangeable and versatile defensively on the perimeter. So they've done a really nice job of finding not only immediate impact players, but players who are going to be sticking around for multiple years and really building that program from the ground up.
Yeah, so just to give some more context to what Sean Miller is doing at Xavier right now, 2018, their class was 66th. 2019, it was 27th. 2020, it was 27th again. 2021, 55. Last year's class ranked 30th. Right now, this one ranks 10th. So an immediate jump in the 24/7 sports team rankings from the recruiting side for Xavier under Sean Miller. And it's not as if Travis Steele recruited poorly. It's just, as you mentioned, there's a brand here with Sean Miller that resonates, and that's been clear right out of the gate. I got a bone to pick though. I think Trey Green, if he were 6'2" instead of 5'10", you guys would have him as like a top 30 prospect. Y'all just knock guys for being short. He can't help the fact that he's short, Adam.
We're basketball scouts. That's fairly relevant. There's if he were 6'2", he'd be ranked higher. It's terrific eval on your part. That's very true. I think size does matter. I will say this. I mean, this is the era of undersized scoring guards, and 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd see someone like Green be ranked even lower. But there's been, especially in the Big East, where positional size isn't quite as relevant as it is in some other conferences.
Look at Marcus Howard.
Yeah, exactly. But then you look at it and you say, because we're trying to take into account multiple variables, including the NBA upside, and that's where the size gets potentially problematic. So, but let's be very candid about 2 things. One, Trey Green has had an outstanding career to date, including a Peach Jam championship, and 2, he's going to be terrific at Xavier. I think it's a great fit, and again, I think in the Big East, he's going to be able to be really, really impactful. But to your point, if he were 4 inches taller, he would be ranked higher.
See, I'm just going ahead and laying the groundwork for when my hypothetical son, who does not exist, is a member of the class of 2044, and he won't be 6 feet tall. There's just no way. But I'm going to need him to get that scholarship offer, and you're going to help me. You're going to help me with that.
Well, we will exaggerate his height when the time comes.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that. In relation to this Big East talk, before we move on, one thing that sticks out to me is the fact that Villanova does not have a single commitment yet in the class of 2023, which is a little bit of a concern. I feel like you never know exactly what philosophy Kyle Neptune's going to take. Maybe they're going to become a transfer portal heavy program. There's many ways to fill a roster with players in this era. But am I reading too much into this? I mean, I go and look at their offer list on 24/7 Sports, and everybody who's on there is either cool or is committed to another school. So what's going on here with Nova? You got any intel for us here?
Well, I think it's it's something to keep an eye on for sure, especially with someone like, Deshaun Harris-Smith, who ended up committing to Maryland. He was perceived as a Villanova lean in the spring. And if you look historically at what this staff has done under Jay Wright, they've done their work early. So this is a team that usually gets a lot of early commitments. And so to be behind the 8 ball here is certainly not what we've seen in the past. However, they do return one of the best rosters in the Big East. And for Kyle Neptune, I think the onus was on connecting with his roster first and foremost. I mean, they did such a good job with that transition of keeping everybody in place, but that is going to be naturally going to need some stabilizing, and so for Kyle to go in, he's going to have to bond with each of those kids, even though he already knew most of them, but it's a different dynamic when you're the head coach. So you're re-recruiting guys like Cam Whitmore and Mark Armstrong, and those become your top priorities. So the fact that they don't have any commitments yet, is that something to keep an eye on? Absolutely. But I think what was more important was him connecting with his new roster in a way in which would allow them to win games and perpetuate the success we've seen in recent seasons right off the bat, because that's more important than getting early commitments. You come out and you see them playing Villanova basketball with Kyle Neptune standing up on the sidelines instead of Jay Wright. The recruiting side is going to take care of itself, because there's no denying that Kyle Neptune is charismatic, that kids love him. He's able to connect with them right away. And so being able to win games in year one was arguably, and I think legitimately, more important than striking early on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't want to over-aggrandize Jay Wright as a recruiter. I mean, you go back a few classes here. 2018, they had the number 9 class. 2019, the number 5 class. But his 2020 class was 108. They only had one player in that class. 2021 was 23. 22, it was the number 21 ranked class. But pretty consistently over the last 5 years of Jay Wright's tenure, they did get at least one top 50-ish prospect, and in some cases several more than that. So he was a really good recruiter, but he wasn't John Calipari or Mike Krzyzewski out there going and getting the top 10 ranked one and done type of guys.
Well, here's what Jay Wright did. He established a very clear recruiting philosophy from a geographic standpoint, from a culture standpoint, and then from a basketball standpoint. So they were very much going to dominate the Northeast from the DMV on up through New England. We saw that throughout whatever it was, the better part of the last decade. The other thing they were prioritizing was multi-year impact players. And I think that's one of the reasons why you didn't see a whole lot of top 5 classes, is because for the most part, that's not what they were targeting. Now, Cam Whitmore, a little bit of a departure from that. And of course, they've had one or two others over the years, but this was a program that was built on continuity. They wanted players who were going to be there for multiple years. And really, listen, everybody talks about culture. Under Jay Wright, Villanova was really about culture, and their recruiting feeded into that. They weren't taking any chances on character, on work ethic, on any of that stuff. And, from a rankings perspective, I think what's far more important than where, even from the recruiting guide, than where your recruiting class is ranked is what it yields on the floor. And with 2 national championships, you just can't deny the impact of their recruiting philosophy. So only in recent years had we seen them start to deviate from that a little bit. You saw them go into different parts of the country. They were exploring the Midwest a little bit. They were exploring the West Coast a little bit. But Jay Wright recruiting was about getting kids from the Northeast region who were high character, ultra workers, who were skilled enough to make shots, who were unselfish enough to share the ball, and who were versatile defensively, especially in the backcourt. He wanted big guards that were switchable 1 through 4. So there was as much of a recruiting philosophy under Jay Wright as there was any head coach I saw anywhere in the country. What's going to be interesting is how much of that Kyle Neptune adopts, or if he looks to tweak it a little bit on his own.
The UEFA Champions League. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold-your-breath acceleration. While Mbappe shines in the city of lights, Benzema's racking up the hat tricks, and the Reds want more magic in Liverpool. This ain't amateur hour. This is the best of the best of the best. This is the UEFA Champions League. Stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Speaking of teams in Philadelphia that are having, success or not success on the recruiting trail, we talked about St. Joseph's last time, Adam, and I thought that we had come to a consensus that St. Joseph's had the top mid-major recruiting class in the country. I thought we were firm on that. And now I hear rumblings from your side of things on 247sports.com that they have been usurped in that way by a program. You want to tell us why you're betraying St. Joseph's?
Yeah, well, I think what the College of Charleston is doing right now on the recruiting trail is really just incredible stuff. I mean, obviously there's a number of different factors that go into it. They hired Thomas Carr, who is the director of Team Loaded North Carolina under Ty White, who runs all of the Team Loaded organization. Thomas Carr, longtime college coach. He came in, he got 3 different commitments from that Team Loaded program, including 2 that are within the top 24/7, meaning the top 150 prospects in the national class of 2023. And when you look at the totality of what they've got with 2 nationally ranked 4-star players, you've got the best mid-major class in the country, and in a conference that's usually a one big conference. So Charleston, it's a great job. It's got great support. There's been speculation about the impact that NIL has played in their ability to put this class together. But there's no denying that this class is really almost historic in terms of what you get in the CAA, because not 1 but 2 nationally ranked prospects is really a game changer in the CAA.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise, I felt like, to see that when Earl Grant left for Boston College, Pat Kelsey made the jump from Winthrop to College of Charleston, because in my mind, I guess I wouldn't have necessarily thought that would be a huge jump up, or that maybe Pat Kelsey had done a good enough job at Winthrop that, hey, maybe he could wait around for a power conference job or an A-10 job or something like that. So now it makes sense.
Job, and he left it after about a day. He took, I think it was 4 years ago, he took UMass, went up there and met with the team, and then changed his mind and went back to Winthrop. So, I think for Coach Kelsey, everybody knows that Charleston did a really good job. And when that job opened up, there was a ton of interest in that job from high major assistants, from sitting head coaches, from coaches that are now Power 5 head coaches at very prominent schools. So that was a really desirable job. And now you're seeing part of the reason why, because they've got a ton of support. They just did some upgrades to the arena. They've got, in the world of NIL, they are being exceptionally competitive, and relative to mid-major schools, they are really setting the bar in that area. And listen, it's in a beautiful part of the country as well. So you've got a lot of different things that make that job as attractive as it is. And now from a recruiting standpoint, they are raising the bar and taking that to a higher level than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember last year them hosting North Carolina on CBS Sports Network, and that arena just looked lit, as you would expect, hosting a regional blue blood like that. But man, it was awesome. It looked like a phenomenal environment. So we'll see if Pat Kelsey keeps landing recruits of this caliber at College of Charleston. He will have ACC schools on the line or others like it before too long. So hate to see you betraying our Hawks there. But I get it. College of Charleston doing some work.
I think even Twitter is going to be able to see through you there. Twitter can't see through much, but I think in this case, Twitter's gonna know what's up. St. Joe's still have a great class, just to emphasize it.
I know they've got a hive on social media too. Speaking of social media, we got a guy in this 2023 class who social media seems to like. A lot of folks out there interested in the recruitment of one Bronny James, currently the number 41 overall prospect in the class of 2023. And of course, the son of LeBron James. So he goes on a visit to Ohio State. Ohio State then loses a commitment from a guy who plays the same position as Bronny James. Adam, is this a coincidence? What's going on here with Bronny and Ohio State? Are the flirtations, are they indicative of a potential commitment? I mean, what are we talking about here?
No, I think we're a ways away from that. I think, the Bronny James recruitment speculation had really started to escalate in the weeks prior to this. And, it took LeBron going on social media and basically clapping back at everybody reporting and saying, hey, you don't know what you're talking about, before I think people started to really take that seriously. And this is the first sign we've seen from Bronny or LeBron that was about his recruitment. They've never spoke about it on the record. They've never visited any other campuses. So to go to Ohio State and to do it in such a public way, to show up at the football game, it was very obviously an indication that this was an option that they would take seriously. Now, the extent to which Chris Holtmann would pursue that in his staff remains to be seen. The other variable here, and you referenced the decommitment, the other variable here is Bronny James is not the only other guard that Ohio State is currently involved with. And you look at guys like Tyson Chapman, who's one of the best remaining guards in the country. Ohio State is very firmly in the mix for him. So when it came to Washington's decommitment, I think he looked at it as like, hey, I'm not sure what my role is going to be here from day one. I've got other places where I can go and be not just play immediate minutes and have a close to I don't want to say guarantee, but a really good idea of what my role is going to be from day one. But hey, they're still recruiting other guards too, and guards that are among the most notable and best in the country. So I think for him, it was an opportunity to pursue see what other options would include in terms of a role from day one. And Ohio State, it speaks to their continued kind of growing presence on the recruiting trail, not just with Bronny James, but they are going to be a destination. You look back at what they did last year with Malachi Branham and the quick jump he made to the NBA. I mean, that's going to resonate with these kids. So yeah, they're going to be a destination for sure.
I would love to see Bronny James play at Akron for this reason. Let's say Imani Bates's career at Eastern Michigan turns into a multi-year endeavor. Unlikely, but hypothetically at least. Bronny James at Akron, Imani Bates at EMU, some epic MAC clashes coming down the pipe there.
So this is beyond speculative, but I was following the NBA and the trade the Cavs made, and I kept hearing how in their current roster they've got 2 bigs and 2 guards, and they're almost maxed out from a cap standpoint, and they're not sure what they're going to do with the wing position. And obviously, well, the dream is LeBron comes back home one more time. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, geez, what would that look like from recruiting? Now, of course, he just signed an extension, and Bronny, assuming he's only going to try and play 1 year in college, might be done at that point. But, listen, Ohio is home for the James family. LeBron is a known Ohio State fan. I think it was very calculated that is where he took his first official visit. Or I'm sorry, unofficial visit. Let me be clear about that. But there's going to be other schools that are in contention here. And it's going to be on the James family to show what those schools are. There's been a lot of speculation, but whether it's Oregon or Michigan or Memphis or whatever else, may evolve, I think the James family is going to show what those options are in the weeks to come. And until they do, I think anything else is, as I've said, it's really just speculation at this point.
Let me get your perspective on this as well. I think you're uniquely equipped to weigh in on this, having seen the hype around Bronny in person over some of these summer circuits, following all this as closely as you do. What exactly would a college coach be getting themselves into, not from a player evaluation standpoint, but from a scrutiny standpoint? I think there's a side of this, and Matt and Gary have discussed this on the podcast as well, but you have to be really committed to want to go out and do this as a college coach because of the intense scrutiny that will be on you if Bronny James is a member of your team, because we're not talking about a slam dunk, one and done, automatic all conference type of a player here. We're talking about the number 41 overall prospect in the class, who by all accounts is a very talented player, who is potentially a future NBA player, but by no means a lock to be a future NBA player. So you invite a heightened level of scrutiny on your program. How do you see that through the eyes of a coach?
There's a lot of different variables to unpack there. And I think that's what, when that first list of schools was released and it said, well, these are the schools that are recruiting him. I knew from talking to members of those coaching staffs that several of those schools that were initially reported were not interested. because they didn't think they thought the risk outweighed the reward. Listen, Bronny James is a very good basketball player. He plays the right way, which I think is extremely relevant here. But you've got all those expectations. You've got to manage the dynamics when it comes to the eyeballs, the expectations in terms of what his role will be and how that will balance with the rest of your roster. Because is he ready to come in and be the man for a college basketball team that's trying to win at the highest level as a freshman? No, he's not, in my opinion. And then there's the impact of his dad, just to be quite frankly. And this is the thing. Anytime, and I've seen this time and time again over the years, anytime there's a player who has a high profile dad, especially one in the basketball community, if they have a high profile parent in general, mom or dad, college coaches are reluctant to recruit that prospect typically, unless they know they want him. Typically in recruiting, you see coaches who are going to kind of express some interest, and soft recruit is a term we hear. But when you have a high profile parent, they're not going to do that unless they are sure they want to move forward, because they don't want to create kind of false expectations among someone who is well-known or established in the field. And with Bronny James in particular, you can bet that is going to be the case to the infinite degree. So any coach or any school that pursues him is going to be very, very deliberate and very sure that not only do they want him as part of their program, but that they are ready to deal with everything else that goes along with it in terms of everything from scrutiny to security, because both will be factors everywhere they travel. It's going to change almost all aspects of the daily program because it just comes with it's just totally different in terms of the amount of eyeballs and attention that Bronny James generates relative to almost anybody else in high school basketball.
Yeah, it's a delicate and fascinating situation. The folks at 247sports.com will have you covered with Bronny James's recruitment as well as everyone else in the class of 2023. And from what I understand, Adam, sounds like y'all are going to have a rankings drop kind of soon in regards to the class of 2024.
Yeah, we did 2023 a couple weeks ago. Was really pleased with the way those came out. 2024 will be coming out this week, and we might have another couple of commitments on the YouTube channel. So make sure you're paying attention.
Yeah, do that. Check out the 247 Sports YouTube channel, and obviously keep it locked here. Just a couple months away from the season and actual basketball. So the content will only continue to ramp up on the Eye on College Basketball YouTube channel as well. So appreciate you guys joining us, and we will catch you next time.